Hello. I wrote this document, it's a report really, and I sent it to Parliament, to Keir Starmer in particular, because he introduced new directives in Britain's child protection guidelines, which were suddenly had to come more in line with EU child protection directives. And the EU child protection directives are absolutely fantastic. They work like a legal machine to protect children, but also to prevent crimes against children. So the premise that they operate on is that for every one child reporting a crime like CSA or child trafficking, that these children, for every one child, there's at least 7 or 8 other, perhaps 10 other children out there that just haven't found the courage or have had the ability to report crimes committed against themselves. And so they understand that if this one person, or however many people the child are included in the child's crime report, are left free, like the longer they're walking free, then the more children are at risk, you see. And so their directives: a child reports a crime, immediately the child receives an independent legal guardian who will make sure that the child is treated respectfully in questioning, that they have therapy during the course of questioning, and that, to make sure that the children's rights are respected. And, these independent legal guardians, obviously they are independent from the local authority and from the police. And they also obviously will have an overseeing body that they can actually report to, or if anybody's got any complaints, you see, because, and obviously they're very, very stringently vetted, because wherever there's children, there will be paedophiles. And we need to understand this, that, paedophilia is, I believe, according to my research, that it is an imposition on human psychology, and it is rooted in this idea of the lesser person. And we've witnessed how much women have suffered serious abuse, murder. I think, 2 women a week in Britain are murdered by their partners. Nobody ever hears about it. The press doesn't pick up on these things. It's just like local news will get that. But, there's at least 2 women a week, apparently, that on average that get killed by a partner, and even more, get seriously injured and often hospitalised by a partner. And again, that is rooted in the denigration of women for over 1,000 yeI see. And I do go into that in this article, in this report. I look at where are these things rooted, and also what solutions are out there, you see. So, because this is something, you can't just keep saying, oh, there's a paedophile, lock him up, or let's keep it all secret. We need to look at this situation. And one of the main reasons, and also we see it with racism, okay, that black people were denigrated for how many hundreds of years. They were considered subhumans and animalistic, bestial, savages. These were the words that were bandied about around black people, that actually they're only worthy to be slaves, and actually we're doing them a favour by making them a slave, you see. This was the kind of thing. And so we see racism, we see black people denigrated. And today we're seeing it with Muslims, like Muslims are being denigrated. That, you can attack a Muslim, they're bad people. And it's that mentality that once you give people this idea that they are superior in whatever way, then they will abuse, because that's the society that we're living in, where everybody's being abused. Capitalism, the way it is working in society now, well, it isn't capitalism, it's corporatism. That is what it is. It is monopoly control, you see. And so people are being abused just by the fact that they have to work how many days a week and can barely afford to pay the bills and the rent and are struggling and full of stress. Well, obviously they're going to scapegoat people. People are getting scapegoated. Some people will bear the brunt of that, and it will always be the weaker, most vulnerable people, including the elderly. There's elder abuse as well. So the main thing that I wanted to say about the child then is that that children are denigrated, you see. They are, from birth, legally defined as a minor human being. Now, a lot of people, they do find it really hard to get their heads around this. It's like, well, yeah, but it just means that they're a child, they're a minor, like you can't sell cigarettes to minors. Well, of course you can't sell cigarettes to children, but the word minor, where's that come from? We don't refer to, say, kittens as a minor cat or a puppy as a minor dog. Do we? So why are our children called minor? And it is actually a legal judgment against the child. That's what it is. It's an antiquated legal judgment that said children are minor. And it stems back right from, when the Roman boot finally stamped its foot on Britain in the form of William the Conqueror, who, all right, he refused to let the Pope govern Britain, but nonetheless, Roman Catholicism was imposed on what was then the Celtic Christian society. And it was a mix of people. There were people from all over the world living in Britain at that time, because previously we'd been invaded by Rome, and the Roman army was comprised of people all over the world, mercenaries. They would take soldiers from Africa, from Middle East, Asia, wherever they could get them. And those people did come here as Roman soldiers, and many of them did stay here and have families and build a life here, you see. So, but the society was completely united under Celtic Christianity that respected children, that respected women's rights. Women had rights to, preach in the local churches. They, like, for example, St. Hilda of Whitby, who was the abbess of Whitby Abbey. Every abbey had an abbess, and as well as an abbot. And it was the duty of the abbess to go round and, look, see what the people need and basically redistribute resources like, oh, well, so-and-so's got no clothes, blah, blah, blah. Can you spare some? Or these need some extra food. Can anybody spare some extra food for Mrs. So-and-so down the way there? This was how society worked. And people had their own common lands as well. So once the Romans came in, the Roman Christians, they called themselves. And, I'm not criticising Catholicism per se here or Catholic people, but within the doctrine of the Roman version of Christianity, children were judged unclean. They were judged as being born in original sin, who were full of evil and needed to be regularly beaten at every opportunity to beat the devil out of them because they were carrying the sins of their mother. They were born in sin. And Jesus, you see, he was a pure person because he was born from a virgin, which is a complete lie. Okay, that is a lie. Jesus was the son of Joseph. That is the fact of it. Or if not, Joseph did take on the role of father, right? But the idea that God goes around impregnating women is completely ridiculous, okay? And but this was their thinking, you see. They were thinking like this, and they used that story, that fictional story, to punish living women. I mean, they literally stripped women of all their property, of all their rights, all their inheritance rights. You know, they suddenly became the total chattel of men under male control. That was the way, that was the order. And of course, men liked it. Men were very pleased. Yeah, I'll take all her wealth. Of course they were. They were getting something out of it. But women lost, and children lost even worse, because they were, from being treated as innocent and holy, as they were under Celtic Christianity, suddenly they're being treated as, you know, born in original sin and need the devil beating out of them. Okay? And even the fact that they were baptised at birth didn't make a jot of difference. And it was a way of keeping control, keeping women under, because that's what Rome did. Rome was quite unique, actually, in that sense, where women had absolutely no rights whatsoever. No matter how rich or poor they had no rights of their own, okay? Whereas in Britain and in most of Europe and most of the Middle East, women did have some power, and especially in Africa, which was a very evenly male-female kind of society. Because, you know, they were matriarchs, you see. There was a matriarch. And with a matriarch, you get a patriarch. Because you can't get a patriarch. You can't get a father without a mother. So you need the matriarchy in order to maintain the patriarchy. And so, and that patriarchy, that was what had to be completely erased, you see. Because a governing body of oligarchs are always going to come into a lot of trouble with a patriarchy. A patriarchy will always stand up for the women and children to stop them from being abused, robbed, whatever. The patriarchy will stand to protect them, because that's the purpose of a patriarchy, you see. That's the purpose of a father, to defend and protect and provide for, help to provide for the women and children. And the women will then also protect and defend the patriarchy and provide for them, provide food, whatever. Women were very, very much valued for the work that they did and their intelligence. And they were regularly part of battles, you know, they were regularly warriors. So all of that had to go, you see. So women, once you've got the women down, then that's it, the patriarchy's gone. Once you've got the matriarchy gone, then you've got no patriarchy. You've got this oligarchy that calls itself a patriarchy. You know, we're serving the real father, the father up in heaven. And so it was really disgusting. And it has never, ever been picked up on that, like I say, real living women were denied all of their rights and were treated disgustingly as second, third class citizens even. All because of, what, a fictional story actually in a book that has its origins in ancient Sumer. So this character in a fictional story called Eve was suddenly, every single woman was guilty. Do you understand that? That was the premise of the stripping women of rights, because they were guilty. They brought man to sin. So never mind that Jesus came to save man from sin. Apparently, he only came to save men, not women. I mean, it was... And women had to live like this for centuries. Centuries of being ignored, of being treated like chattel, of being robbed, killed, whatever, raped. giving birth to children in absolute squalor, because Britain was an absolutely filthy place, most of the cities and most of the population, 80% of the population, lived in the rural villages. They were sent into cities to go and work in the big houses as servants and cooks and butlers and you name it. And that is the basis. And all of that was not British culture. Okay? It was a culture that developed under the auspices of an oligarchy calling itself a godly father, that had absolutely crushed the matriarchy, toppled the patriarchy, and thereafter had to keep that matriarchy crushed down, because the moment it ever was liberated again, then, socialism was going to break out. Except nobody called it socialism then, because they were, the reality of the way people lived was socialism. Okay? It was socialism. But until an academic comes along like, Marx, who I believe was a total shill, okay? But I'm not going to go into that here. But until he came along to articulate, oh yes, this is socialism, right? And this is communism. But you see, socialism and communism are very, very different things. So that was why they keep the women down, because there would be a rise in compassion, a rise in care and conscience, and that the male would be attached to that. You see, his mind, his heart would grow up with love for women, with love for children, with love for the elderly, with love for the people around him. But in a world where women are denigrated and have got really not much to give, and children are denigrated and men are exalted as, yes, you've got all the rights and power, then this is the culture that we're living in now. This is what we have. And this is our children in Britain in the year 2025. Okay? Now, I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor of child abuse, child sexual abuse. So I live with the damages of it. And that's why I take my time to write this kind of stuff. I don't write super brilliantly. My work isn't perfect. But nonetheless, it does share information, and very, very important points are made. And like I say, the word minor is still there. A judgment made by men who are now dead, misguided men who actually knew very little, did not understand a woman or a child, because they were Roman, and Romans, women and children to Romans were like, yeah, you could kill a child and nobody would bat an eyelid. Okay? That was Rome. So that's the culture, you see, that people are saying we've got to defend British culture. No. If we're going to defend British culture, then we need to get back to our roots, okay? Back to our roots. Celtic Christianity, you see. The cross, the 4 equinoxes within the circle of a solar year, that's the cross of life. And that's why they incorporated Jesus into their Druid faith, that was a living faith and was based on living nature and humanity itself. It was a living God, as it were, is what they worshipped, not a figure on a cross. A crucifixion, an instrument of torture, became our holy. That was what replaced the Celtic cross, was a symbol of Roman torture. Now, I'm not dissing people wearing crucifixes. I understand people have a love and all this type of stuff, but what I'm saying is that is what happened. When you compare the two, there's no denying one is an instrument of Roman torture and the other one is a symbol of life, because we are all born on and die on that cross of life, on the 4 equinoxes. So this term minor is actually an abomination against a child. And we need to erase it. We do. We need to look at our children and understand that our leader in life needs to be their needs. Not just our own children, but everybody's children. Because if we're not going to look after everybody's children and we just look after some children and they live very nice lives, very protected and in their lovely environments, but then they've got to live in the world that is then, on the ground at least, dominated by these children that have been deprived. And deprivation breeds depravity. And they're abused and they abuse. And this is how it's gone on and on and on and on until today. It is at endemic proportions. And the majority of paedophiles in Britain are not Asian gangs, right? 83% of all child abusers in Britain that are caught and convicted, 83% are white British men. 83%. So you could get rid of all the Asians tomorrow. You'd only cut child abuse down by 1 or 2%. Right? So all these people out there, you know, hanging round Farage and his madness, you know, him pointing at small boats. Have a look at my last video and you'll understand what's going on there. But, you know, they're all around him. We've got to protect our women and children. Yeah? Well, suppose we evict every single Asian in Britain, right? So you're still going to have 83%. So then it'd be what? Nearly 100%, wouldn't it? Would be white men. Because black people actually feature very, very low on the scale of child sexual abuse. And this is the madness, you see. This is the madness, where madness breeds madness, to the extent that they want to vote for some people, want to vote for somebody to protect the women and children, apparently. A man who the first thing he wants to do is replace the Human Rights Act, right? That was codified and sanctified by every nation, and it was very carefully put together by multiple people, originally penned by 2 British lawyers, okay? But no, they want to just throw that away, leave the ECHR, leave the ICC, leave the ICJ, and replace it with a Bill of Rights, some document that was penned up in a Tory back room, okay, under David Cameron, because he was the first one that tried to bring this Bill of Rights in. We've got no idea what it is, but you can guarantee it'll be, have you got money? Then you've got rights. Okay? And anybody voting to remove human rights, you need to understand one thing for sure. You are not voting to protect women and children. You are voting for children to be even more abused and suffer even more, and women as well, than they already are under this present system. With immigrants in Britain as well, right? You are condemning them to absolute hell. Because with human rights also comes women's rights, also comes children's rights and workers' rights. So, you know, I sent this to Keir Starmer and Thingy and Parliament. Nobody has even commented on it. Nobody said a word about it. Okay? So, you know... This, for example, and I'll just read you this little section of it. So, child protection agencies can quickly become corrupt, e.g. social services have access to very vulnerable children and babies, have power to legitimise abusers as foster carer or guardian, etc., and hand children into their custody, as well as organise child benefits. By today's reckoning, according to studies from 2012 to 2013, over 200 babies under the age of 1 are disappearing from social services records each year. When it comes to children aged 2 to 18, the missing amounts to thousands, and nobody held to account. Analysis shared with Newsweek shows that according to the Department of Education statistics for the year ending March 31st, 2013, around 1,910 children legally defined as under the age of 18 left the care system in England for unknown reasons, including 180 babies under the age of 1. In the same period in 2012, about 2,260 children left the system for unknown reasons. Right? And this was from Newsweek. So I've got the link up here for you. UK care system branded disgraceful over missing children. Missing children. There you go. 180 babies. Oh gosh, I just do not know what's going on with this mouse. It's a really bad mouse. Bad mouse. So, that's it. So 180 babies under the age of 1 in 2013. And in the same period, 2012, 160 babies went missing, besides the thousands of children that went missing in those 2 years. Detailed figures for 2014 are not yet available. And you know what? I've not seen any more studies like this done because there's no money. We're in austerity, so the government isn't paying for funding for reports like this anymore. It's down to people like me, the survivors, okay? So, yes, 180 babies and 160 babies in 2012, 2013. So that amounts to, what is it? 400, 340 babies. Gone. Missing from the care system. And so it says here, when children officially leave the care system, they are logged by the authorities in categories providing the reason for their withdrawal. These categories include children who are adopted, returned to their parents or family, taken into foster care, those who've grown out of care, and those who are deceased. But children who don't fall into these categories are placed into a category that the Department for Education simply labels other, also known as E8. E8, other or E8. So a child has been taken off its parents because, you know, the state doesn't want to give them family support and education to help that family, to invest in that family with support, with education, to help them be better parents, help them live better, perhaps more comfortable lives, maybe get into education and start a new life because they come out of intergenerational poverty and abuse that's been going on for centuries, okay? And they come out of that and they invest. But no. This country would rather give, and the average cost for a child in care today is something like £280,000. And that's listed in, I give you the evidence of it in that document, right? £280,000 that local authorities have to pay for one child in care. That's how much it all comes to with social services, because it's all privatised. Social services, the childcare system, even the family courts, it's all privatised. It's all run for profit, right? So they get these children and, you know, put them into substandard care, actually. I mean, look what's coming out. Look what's coming out. Like, what is it, a third of the prison a third, or is it half of the prison population and secure childcare units are actually, half of them are children that were in care. So the state is not doing a very good job. The state would be better off spending, what, half of that money, say £100,000, on helping a family get on its feet, on helping people to live better lives. But instead they're giving it to these corporations that aren't looking after the children, that are just dumping them here and there. They're not looking after them, and children are going missing. Babies under the age of 1. Calm down, Suki. It's my dog, Suki. She's a bit woofy tonight. So, it's disgraceful, says Phil Frampton, former national chair of the Care Leavers Association. It is clear that the government and local authorities don't take seriously their responsibilities for young people in their care. It's quite likely that these children have fallen into the hands of sexual exploiters. They may well have been trafficked. Who knows what's happened to these children? And who cares? Who cares? Because nobody's picking up on it. Why? You know, this was published in 2015, okay? And it's by Newsweek, which is a European publication, okay? Did you see it in The Guardian? Did you see it in The Independent? Did you see it on the BBC? Why were the BBC not asking questions like, well, what's happened to all these babies? How is it that a baby can go missing? 350 nearly babies in 2 years have just vanished from the care system. How many are vanishing today? Is anybody checking up? No, because you're all too busy pointing at fucking people in boats. Sorry for my language, but my gosh, I am absolutely... I feel like I'm living in crazy madland where people, you know, their concerns are actually wildly out of sync with where they really should be, our priorities of what we should be looking at, you know. And so, as it says, Home Secretary Theresa May launched a nationwide inquiry in July into decades of child abuse and blah, blah, blah. Why? And what came out of it? Absolutely nothing, actually. Why did they do it? We didn't need an investigation into child abuse in Britain when Europe had already done it and produced the child protection directives that work like a legal machine. You see, a child comes to the police station, they get an independent legal guardian, they report their crime, they receive therapy, police promptly arrest suspects and seize computers and laptops. And onus of proof of innocence is on the suspect, which means every single child reporting abuse, according to EU child protection directives, you know, and whatever people can say bad about the EU, one thing they cannot fault are those child protection directives. And there's not one country that is where they're fully operating, I don't think. So we didn't need the IICSA because the Europe had already done it. And Europe includes people from Britain had contributed to devising these EU child protection directives that work like a legal machine. Because we do understand the issue. We do understand how serious it is. You see? But no, they decide to waste a load of money and get all these people involved who then disclose their stories, their PTSD is often re-triggered. I mean, it was really difficult. And I did go to Liverpool and report to the IICSA, and absolutely nothing came of it except I was absolutely triggered and, you know, I had a really, really bad time. And I think all they did was just cover things up. They covered stuff up and they ignored stuff that is happening now. They were only interested in historical stuff. And nothing was done. So what was the point of it? It was just a show of doing something and a chance to throw a few million at whatever. And distract people well, we've got the IICSA now. Yes, the IICSA is investigating it. Yes, we know there's all these problems, but the IICSA is investigating it. No, the IICSA, as shown in my report, has done blooming nothing. Okay? So, I was really pleased to see that Zack Polanski here, he has picked up on the issue, and he's talking here with George Monbiot, who, on the child protection issue, he's been spot on, and I will give him his due that he has regularly reported in his column in The Guardian or The Independent. I think it was The Independent, I'm not sure, but he has reported on this, and here Zack Polanski is discussing with him, and it's so refreshing to see a possible future Prime Minister actually talking about this and actually saying the quiet parts out loud.
I've heard you tell this story before, is the dehumanization of what capitalism does to people. I think the care experience young people or the social care sector, I know you is one that always resonates with me. I don't know if you're happy to share.
Yes, it's quite amazing. Social care is one of these things which has been quietly privatized piecemeal, and what happens particularly to children in care is almost shocking beyond belief, because children in care have become a commodity which is traded now between corporations, and a child in care is worth roughly £100,000. So you will, there isn't a sort of stock market listing for children, but effectively that's what you are doing. You are buying children as units of provision. You have the right to provide the care setting for that child, and what you'll do is get as much money for that child as you possibly can from a local authority, while cutting your costs as much as you can. So then you will get accommodation for that child in the place where it's cheapest to find accommodation. So often in deindustrialized towns, in places where there's effectively no social support, no infrastructure, you're a long way from schools, you're a long way from any of the things which children might need, places where there's derelict housing, in effect, and they will buy up blocks of derelict housing and just cram children in there. In one case I came across, a child was placed in a tent. And so they're keeping their costs as low as possible. They're charging huge amounts of money from the public purse to take these children, because local authorities' budgets are cut, and the local authorities have been, just completely savaged administratively. They just have to go with the emergency provision that they're offered, and they sort of can't get ahead of that point in order to create a strategic provisioning service of their own. They're just sort of always at the mercy of these private providers. And so these kids are kicked from pillar to post. One child I came across, I met, she'd had 40 foster placements. And of course, it's just utterly devastating. This is a sacrificial caste of children. They're being sacrificed to money. That is frankly what is happening. And, they might be in one part of the country where whatever's left of their family might be, their friends are, any connections, any training courses they might be on, any charitable connection, any other things which might be allowing them to find a way into society. Suddenly they're swept away from that, and they're dumped in some place far from anyone they know, far from anything they know, far from the provision they need, in a basically derelict quarter of a city where there's nothing for them. And is it remotely surprising that 62% of the children in corrective institutions, in other words, prison, come from the care system?
Yeah. There's so many things about the way our country works that piss me off, but whenever I've heard you tell that story before and I just felt it again, it feels like there's no nuance here. That is one of the deepest injustices.
It's evil. I don't often use that term. In fact, I very rarely do, but this is evil.
Just to come back round.
So it's evil. And it is evil. And how can we live with this evil? I just don't understand. I don't understand how people can be pointing at the actual minority of child abusers in Britain. And, you know, you get all these men so het up about how they've got to protect the women and children, and good on them, because, yes, that's what men should be doing, not abusing them, not exploiting them, but protecting and defending them and helping to provide for them. But look what is going on. You know, our children, they've got a price tag on their head. I mean, you get social services. They go around all the estates. Any poor person, any poor woman, even women who've got postnatal depression are having their babies taken off them before they even leave the hospital because they've got postnatal depression. And they get the baby taken off them. And then that's it. It's forcibly adopted. Well, it could be one of the babies that go missing suddenly. What happened to that baby? Oh, we don't know. Well, put it down as other or E8. I mean, I find it heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking. And I look at what's going on in Gaza and Ethiopia and so many places in this world where children are being killed, terrorised, orphaned, starved, injured. Honestly, of course, that's the world we live in, because children are just a minor concern. You see, that is the depth of the legality. That is what that legal judgment means. That's why a government can impose austerity on its population. A British government can impose austerity on its whole nation without any cares about how it will impact children, because the children are a minor concern. And that's why crimes against children aren't big on police agendas, okay? And because they're a minor concern. It's all a minor issue related to minors. And when a child gives a crime report, well, they might be lying. They're not actually credible because they're a minor human being. They might be lying. Well, some children do lie. That's no doubt about that. But they're very easily found out. When you get very young children reporting abuse and citing details of abuse, then yes, it needs to be investigated. The child has to be believed. That is number one. Number one is that every child has to be believed. Because in Britain, people like Jimmy Savile got away with it for so long. Even though the children had come to report the crimes, they were dismissed as incredible. So Jimmy Savile walked free and abused even more children. He had access to 21 children's homes. He was a child trafficker as well. But you don't hear anybody talking about that, do you? He was a child trafficker. He probably, very likely, trafficked children to Edward Heath, who was also a child abuser, known among his victims as the Claw, because he liked to wear a claw while he was abusing the children. You know, Wiltshire police, they did investigations up and down the country. After their investigation, they were 120% certain that Edward Heath was a paedophile. There's no denying it. We had a paedophile for a Prime Minister. And we had a friend of a paedophile for Prime Minister in the form of David Cameron. And don't think that any of the other Prime Ministers really have been any different when it comes to child abuse. They keep a lid on it. They keep it hidden. That's why the BBC never informed the British public that how many children were disappearing from care. And the older ones, you might say, all right, they ran away. And maybe they are being abused, but nobody's took any time to find them. But babies under the age of 1, toddlers, children of 5 years old, 6 years old, how many of them went missing? But babies. Who puts an order in for babies? And like I say, why wasn't the BBC, why wasn't this on the BBC? Why wasn't it BBC News? Why wasn't it BBC News? Why was this less important than people arriving here on boats, which actually constitute the absolute minority of people arriving in Britain every year from abroad? On work visas, more people arrive here on work visas than arrive in boats, okay? People doing the jobs that apparently British people can't do. So I'm just going to get back to this now. You know, I mean, George Monbiot there cites a figure of 100,000, but I share the evidence here. It is by now around 280,000 now pounds per year for each child that gets taken into care. And that money is divided between social services and foster carers. Just hold on a moment. I'm just going to have to turn that call off. Sorry. Oh gosh, this mouse is just not working right today. I'll just pause for a moment. Sorry about that. I seem to be getting all kinds of interruptions today, you know, and so how many children then are actually being searched for? We don't know, because there's thousands go missing every year. Trafficked children that are put into the care system, they're disappearing from care at an alarming rate. Child trafficking victims disappearing from care at an alarming rate. Okay. The true scale of trafficked children who have gone missing is unclear, as many local authorities lack data on how many are in their care. I mean, these children who are getting dumped into care because of abuse, are they receiving therapy? No. But the very worst thing that's come in now is this. Okay, so numerous UK citizens have suffered arrest, seizure of property, gagging orders and even incarceration in their efforts to raise public awareness and/or appeal for help in relation to concerns for the safety and welfare of cared-for children. Under guise of defending a child's lawful right to privacy, all of the details of CSA cases and associated concerns under jurisdiction of the family courts are also slapped with secrecy orders, making it virtually impossible for anyone to address genuine lawful suspicion. In all cases, suspect authorities are left to investigate themselves. A new gagging order is being used against the parents of children under social services supervision under the guise of protecting the child. The new order makes it illegal for parents and children both in or out of the care system to talk about or allege maltreatment or abuse. It also makes it illegal for anyone to tell you they are gagged. Considering the record of failures by social services and the record of endemic abuse of children in the social services care system, one has to ask oneself, who is protecting who? This new legislation breaches just about every article of Human Rights Act, the Rights of a Child Act, to which this country alleges to adhere. Now, I've left the link to that. What do they know? Because this is from an FOI request. Okay? I mean, what the bloody hell is this? What is it? What is this? What is it? Why aren't people going absolutely crazy about it? Because basically they have said, right, that's it. A child gets taken into care. Nobody gets to know what's happened to that child. If the child talks about it, they've committed a crime. If a parent talks about it, they've committed a crime. They're not about to talk about or allege maltreatment or abuse that they've suffered in care. Excuse me. Wake up, people of Britain. What the hell is this? How did it get through? Why is nobody bloody talking about it? To see all these people who want to vote for somebody who's going to remove the human rights that already aren't being satisfied. And why aren't our human rights being satisfied? Because nobody is bloody standing up for them. And your rights are like muscles. You fail to use them and you will go weak. And you will lose your human rights eventually because you'll be too weak even to fight for them. And when they're gone, they're gone. Right? It took centuries and 2 world wars before the people of Britain finally won the human rights that we lived by 1,000 years ago. Rights for women and children to be respected. And they're not being respected. They are not being respected because the old mentality is still banging hard on everybody's head that gets born into this country. And it is time to throw it out. It is time to erase this law, to erase the term minor against our children. Our children are not minors. They are most important people because they are developing human beings. And as such, they are the future of humanity. And they deserve and need every investment that our nation can give. And if you're not investing in your children and you're investing in war and weapons and corporations and locking people up and taking children into care because the family's too poor to care for them, or they're too ill-educated, or they have no idea what a child is because they were never taught about it. Why aren't schools teaching children at least how to be a parent, what it entails, what a child needs, how to have a relationship, whether it's a relationship, as a heterosexual or whatever. How do you relate? What is fair in a relationship? These kind of things. Why aren't children learning about this? But instead, they are just being taught the basics. We do need to get a grip. And we do need to understand that the child is our future. And the child is most important. So all these people going around, they're a VIP, the Prime Minister is a VIP. No, he bloody isn't. Okay? Who is the VIP? The child. The MIP. Most important person. And until we get that for our children, and until we are looking at all children as our children, humanity's children, no matter which country they're in, we have a duty and responsibility to make sure all children are safe. But no, our Prime Minister's quite happy to see children shot in the heart and head for target practice by Israel. That is what is happening. There's no denying it, but they stand stolidly and deny it. And it is outrageous that these things are happening, that a law like this has been passed that has left children with absolutely no protection whatsoever. No legal guardian, right? And my gripe with Keir Starmer, because, if you look at, and in this report, I covered the Rochdale case of children, okay? And, that was absolutely terrible, this organised criminal network that did involve Asians, but also a lot of white people as well. And the police weren't even going to prosecute. They said that the witnesses weren't credible, right? Because one was in care. One of the witnesses, the witness survivors, she got told by a police officer that she was what was wrong with society, right? And I've covered that in this article. And the only reason why the Rochdale gang got prosecuted, and I think they got 9 years each, most of them, right, was because Nazir Afzal, a Muslim, who was head of public prosecutions at that time, he overturned the CPS decision and got them prosecuted. Thank you. Does anybody celebrate Nazir Afzal for doing that? A Muslim who made sure that Muslims got prosecuted who'd abused children. And it was only down to him. Nazir Afzal. You know, everything people are being fed right now, it's wrong. It is Zionist crap, okay? Far right Zionist crap. Nazi crap. Because that's who this country is supporting in Ukraine. A set of Nazis that they trained to terrorise the Ukrainian population first and to start civil war. Absolutely disgusting, right to the extent now that we're all facing World War III and they're talking about conscription. Get lost. Why? Because Russia committed the crime of providing cheap gas to Europe. How many children have suffered and died in Ukraine? It's abominable. It's abominable. We need to stop and think about our children. I mean, the only party at the moment that I've seen that anybody talk about specifically about children is Zack Polanski of the Green Party. That's why I've joined the Green Party. I've joined the Green Party because I believe in him. I believe that he's honest. But he could turn out to be a liar. But then when I look at the alternatives, it's like, well, yeah, actually, I've got no choice. I'm going to have to vote for somebody because we can't have fascists coming in who are going to take away our human rights. Calm down, Suki. So, I know she's listening to me going on. She's probably getting a bit agitated. But they would have, like I say, the Rochdale case would never have been prosecuted because they said the victims were incredible. And it was the same with Jimmy Savile. They were incredible. I mean, Keir Starmer shut that down. Yeah, they're all incredible. Right, Keir Starmer. So what happens in 2013, and I think Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions at that time. In 2013, these new directives came into being that Britain had to follow Europe, and we had to, at least when a suspect is arrested, that you'd also check, you'd immediately seize their computers and phone and stuff like this, right, to investigate them. And so Keir Starmer steps in with his credibility clause. He actually made the credibility. He entrenched it in British child protection guidelines as law now. Before, it was just a police decision, like, oh yeah, they just decided, oh, they were incredible, right? But no, he made it law in child protection guidelines that the police, they not only have to get in touch with, have strategy meetings. As soon as a child reports a crime, the first thing they do is organise a strategy meeting with the school and social services and and CAFCAS from the family courts. Why? Why is it that every child that supports CSA, you've got to involve the teachers and the head, and they talk about privacy for a child? Well, it seems that there's no privacy for a child among the people now controlling that child. Why? Why is that allowed to happen? Why do they have to involve the school and social services? This is totally wrong. And especially when we know that every place, as I've said, that anything to do with children, it is going to attract paedophiles. And the majority of paedophiles in Britain, are professional people. Professional people. People who are educated. They know what they're doing. Even doctors. right? Even there was one doctor, was it Miles Bradbury? He was he was a specialist at some hospital, and he used to take photos of children with his spy pen. These were children who were suffering with leukemia, right? And he would take photographs of them with their parents sat in the room while he's examining the child. He'd take snapshots of them with his pen. Right. That's how evil these people are. That's how dangerous they are. And I bet to everybody, he would have seen the most loveliest, nicest man ever. Oh, he's a professional. He's a top specialist at the children's hospital. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, yes, Mr. So-and-so. Oh, yeah. But no, he was an evil child abuser. Children he knew who were suffering from terminal illness, some of them. And he abused them. And, you know, but this country treats photographs of children, you know, like they get fucking suspended sentences. I mean, one guy in London, I haven't got the link up, but I will leave the link underneath. A friar, Tim Gardiner, I think his name was. He got caught with thousands of indecent images of children, some of them so horrific the court were in tears, having to have to look at them. He got a suspended sentence and told that he could still work with children. You know, he wasn't going to be prohibited from working with people under the age of 16. I mean, again, because we don't care about our children, because they're minor human beings and it's buried in our consciousness. It's a word spell. It's an evil spell, right? That's what it is. That word, minor, must be erased. Developing human, right? Developing human is what needs to replace it. Most important person is how we need to understand a child. And once we understand that, everything else in society will fall into place. Once we understand that children, under no circumstances is any child to be put at risk because they're not a minor concern. They're a major concern. Once we get that through our thick Babylon heads that we're living in now, things will change. Everything will change. But like I say, you know, we need to understand. You see, you can't solve a problem if you don't really understand it. And I understand it because I've lived it and I've been through the care system and I've researched it and I understand it. And the points I'm making are very, very important. But I'm being ignored because I'm just a survivor who's got PTSD and, you know, blah, blah, blah. I'm being judged lesser all the time. And so my work is ignored. But there's very important stuff in there and people need to read it. And I'm asking people, read this report. Share it. Send it to your MP. Make your own points. Tell your MP what you are upset about. But and especially about Keir Starmer. Because like I say, when the EU directives came in and, you know, people, they were saying to police, well, you at least have to arrest people. Okay. And in Britain, onus of proof of innocence is not on the suspect, as it is under EU protection directives. The child is believed, the suspect has to prove that they're innocent, right? Through investigations, questioning, whatever. And police will make their mind up. But Keir Starmer, he said what police have to do is not to focus on whether or not the child makes a good witness, but is the child's crime report credible? Right? That is what he entrenched into law. After all the trouble we've had with credibility closing down, case after case after case. Is the child's crime report credible? I mean, it is such a disgusting, dangerous thing to include in child protection directives because it actually encourages child abusers, especially organised child abusers, to abuse children in ways that will, on disclosure, appear incredible. But incredible things are happening to children. You know, isn't it incredible that a doctor, a top specialist with his spy pen, is actually taking indecent photographs of children while he's examining them? And even with the parents sat in the room. And I will leave you the link to that under this. I will. So, as I say, you know, this, please read through this document. Please share it. Please talk about our children and demand that this legal term minor is removed from our child, because what Britain's done in law has spread all over the world. All over the world now, children are described as minor human beings, as lesser, less important, insignificant, trivial. Well, they're bloody well not. And they need investment. And they need it through families. And families need, as is their human right, family support. If the family's struggling, they need family support for whatever reason. We need to be pouring money into family support workers who are there to support a family, not to judge them and take the children and dump them where. So I'm going to end it there. I've definitely gone way over time. I'm sorry for the interruptions. God bless.